Such beautiful hearts. I can feel from the softness and the exquisite, tender sensitivity and the great stability in the hearts in this group that we are going to be able to make awesome progress tonight. Watching the blossoming of a flower of life matrix within the context of our collective. And that, folks, is a byproduct of mental and emotional stability already present in the group. It was one of the first things I noticed as I started looking into the group, was how we have such deeply spiritual, very balanced consciousness, very evolved, very stable, which means we have this big sturdy platform on which to build tonight's webinar. Oh, and it's 8 o'clock. So here we go. All right. And I see we seem to have pretty much everybody. So that's good. As always, I'll start with a little prayer of gratitude and then we'll dive in. But even before I do that, the technical points, questions can be asked. And I encourage you, if any questions come up in the webinar or points that I bring up that you're not certain about, please feel free to ask. That's one of the fun things about this being a live webinar. So you can ask your questions. There's a button up in your left corner, and those questions will be handled anonymously. And I do encourage people to ask questions which are basically group-oriented, although I would like to say that sometimes people ask questions that are of a very personal nature, and that's okay too. I will tend to handle the answers in a way which is useful to everyone in the whole group, basically, without giving out personal details. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Ma. Thank you to the source of the whole creation, the birther of all the universes, for being the very life of this live webinar. Thank you to all the diversified, infinite diversity of expression of that underlying singularity, particularly those aspects with the capabilities, perspective, and wisdom to promote evolutionary transformation, to heal. And as I'm saying that part of the prayer, I'm seeing that energy awakening in the collective of our group and just starting to stir the consciousness in the group. So we all get the healing that we most need. Thank you to the ancestors. Thank you to them for all that they've done throughout the centuries to make it possible for us to be at this incredible moment in history. A lot of comfort is going to the ancestors. Homage is going to the ancestors. A lot of compassion. Thank you to the divine in all of us for coming together in our sacred space of this live webinar in order to dive more deeply into the mechanics of manifestation, the field of energy healing. Tonight we're talking in terms of mental and emotional levels of the being. And we're talking about the role of the inner reality to structure the outer reality. So thank you to the divine in everyone for contributing and receiving and taking part in this collective upliftment of all of our consciousness. Wow. Thank you for every life experience, and may all this information be offered to everyone in the webinar, both verbally through my words, but also internally through the interior of this live webinar as well. Thank you, everyone. All right. So the title of tonight's webinar is Establishing Inner Balance for Outer Success, Mental and Emotional Wellness. So I just wanted to start with a very brief description for the newcomers regarding the basic overarching principles of energy healing. So in energy healing, the individual directs their attention intelligently in order to activate specific areas or functions in the field of consciousness in order to produce or promote a specific effect. In other words, the range of human consciousness is infinite, and the potential of human consciousness is infinite. And awareness is, by its nature, a very pure element. It is like a tool which enlivens whatever it lands upon. So the principle is to be able to understand enough about the mechanics of that process in order to get the attention going in exactly the spot that it needs to be in order to produce the specific effects desired. And in this case, basically, we're looking at perfect health, beautiful, enriching relationships, abundance, affluence, and abundance in life, and of course, the unfoldment of spiritual experience. All right. So there you have it. If any questions come up about that as we're going along, please feel free to ask. The next thing that I wanted to talk about was how one of the things I've noticed now in all the years that I've been doing energy healing is that the denser levels of the physiology tend to be the areas, and this is just general, this is basically general, but it seems to be that the denser levels of the physiology tend to be the areas where imbalances are more likely to sit. And the reason is that the very nature of being human is to experience reality in the context of boundaries and limitations, because the human body by nature is bound. It's a solid thing. It has an ending spot and a beginning spot and all the in-between parts, but there's, it's not like really abstract and unbounded like a field, the physical aspect. So we have these denser levels of the physiology: physical, etheric, mental, and emotional. And then we have the four subtler, and this is me arbitrarily dividing the range of expression of humanity into 8 arbitrary levels, but it's working at the moment in order to allow us to focus our attention. So the subtler levels tend to be the areas where the solutions are found. Ultimately, the field of infinite, unbounded, divine being is the ultimate source of all solutions. An infinite, unbounded divine being expresses itself as those 8 levels. So really, infinite divine being is all there is. But it has chosen to express itself in the context of boundaries in order to know its own nature, in order to revel in its own nature, in order to expand. As a general rule, the areas that we find problems with, concerns, etc., are in those 4 denser levels of the physiology. And the areas where the solutions, as I mentioned before, tend to be in the subtler levels. So that's why today, in today's webinar, I thought it would be interesting to look at the mental and emotional level in particular, because what I've been seeing now is sort of general patterns over the course of many years. I've been doing this about 8, going on 9 years, is that particularly for ancestors and past lives, that the belief systems are one of the key points at which we get tripped up in our process of realizing our unity or oneness with creation. And that's really where we're at with this, is how do we integrate or organize the relationship between details and wholeness? Ultimately, we know on an intellectual level, on the level of deepest knowing, that wholeness is all there is. But there are all these details on the surface. There are all these fine points in life. One of the things that I see happening for people, and this is going into the group here, because we're starting to look into these 4 denser levels, right? Because this session is about healing everything, is going in and healing all that stuff, is in these 4 levels, because this is the area where we get details, where we see details. There tend to be attachments. There are 2 things. I see attachments to boundaries, features and details of reality. The other thing I'm seeing is habits of responding to the details in specific ways, in like old ways, like ways that the parents and the grandparents and the great grandparents, everybody always responded and reacted in certain ways. A lot of those patterns are very deeply enmeshed in the collective consciousness of humanity. As an example, to make that a little more concrete, my son, the millennial generation, they get the news really fast. Like, they're on places like Twitter and Reddit, and often they're seeing the news as it's unfolding. So if you watch CNN or NBC or something like that, Fox News, you will get the news 24 to 48 hours after my sons get the news. So the point is that yesterday we were sitting in the kitchen and my son said, "Oh, right now there is a chemical attack taking place on a military installment in the Middle East. US military are being attacked by chemical weapons." And right there, he was getting photos and he was getting the whole thing. And the ISIS, which was attacking, was using a chemical weapon, which was banned by United Nations, I think, or anyway, some kind of overarching military organization that countries like the US and European countries and so forth will not use. Russia will not use certain kinds of chemical weapons because they're too horrible. And those were the ones that were being used yesterday. And there was a little part, there was like a little automatic knee-jerk reaction within the context of that story of responding to the horribleness of it with the pictures and everything. And I won't give you that whole picture, but in the collective consciousness, there's a natural sort of deep-seated fear of the density, which is still sitting in the collective consciousness. And this fear is, when it aggravates, when it rises up, has a tendency to feed the darker, denser energies that are already present on Earth. Likewise, there is underneath that are belief systems. And that's why we wanted to talk about mental body tonight, because that's where we tend to hold. What happens is a belief system gets set in the system and it goes in the mind. It starts out at a conscious level, right? You know, I was told when I was a little kid not to do something. And so then I got this belief, I will never do that thing, whatever it is, you know. Whereas maybe later, maybe that thing that I was doing as a little child isn't appropriate for a little child, but maybe later as an adult, it would be a bit okay, right? But then as an adult, that belief got stuck deeper, deeper, deeper down into what we would call the mental, the subconscious and unconscious levels of the mind. And at that level, it got stuck. So then as an adult, I'm like, why can I never do that thing? Like other people do that, you know, drive a car or whatever. Anyway, I obviously drive a car, but the point is that there can be things like that that come in originally at the conscious level of the mind, and then they embed at subconscious and unconscious levels of the mind. And what I was seeing, because the group, God bless you, is that there are belief systems that are held at a collective level of the consciousness of humanity that do the same thing, that tend to sit down at the subconscious and unconscious levels. And there are little patterns like vicious cycles that are connected to the belief systems, and then the way the belief systems interface in the mental body with things like habits and reactions and the way we hold impressions like that. And so the little vicious cycles can get created both individually and on the level of the collective, to cause loops to take place that seem to just roll spontaneously. And there's a feeling of how do we liberate from those loops? So this webinar is about supporting the ability to recognize the loops and find the spot at which they can be dismantled. Going back into the fear, and what I'm doing at this point is I'm just reading off of what's happening in the collective, in our group. So what I'm finding is it's that fear connected to and associated with that attack, recent attack. So what's happening is a download is coming in. That means something along the lines of what we would call like a kind of divine cognition. That means information being received by the physical, mental, emotional structure of the being. And what I'm understanding is that on an individual level, those responses to negativity, such as habits and pain bodies and attachments and impressions and those little vicious loops that get created, at an individual level, these structures have a kind of life of their own, and they also have a life of their own on a collective level. So here's the thing. We now are in a position of capability, stability, understanding that will allow us to move into some of these darker areas, to look at these loops in detail, in a way that will allow the understanding to unfold of exactly how to dismantle them, like dismantling the cord from the telephone before it rings. And thank you. And to do so in an environment that is very stable and is very safe and is very sacred. So what we're going to do now, before we go into the big dismantle, is we're going to establish that foundation upon which the work is performed. So the first thing we're doing, thank you, I'm thanking what I'm doing is I'm offering that suggestion. How do we create the stable foundation to the source of creation? Then I said thank you because the answer is coming back. The first thing that's happening is awareness is focusing in on what we would call the solution area, the subtler levels of the physiology where the solutions lie. So celestial level, causal level, spirit, and astral levels. Astral level is where the shielding, I was going to say kavach, I was going to use the Vedic word kavach, but it's shielding basically of the physiology. Spirit level is where your being has a deep, abiding understanding of the nature of natural law, where we interface with natural law as natural law, where basically natural law is lived as the reality of one's own being, basically, there at the spirit level. The causal level, we're working with very, very fine impulses of energy, which are being manipulated very, very delicately, like a teeny little, like a little turn, just like that, just a little turn like that here, a little turn like that is enough to produce very specific effects, which give rise or produce results in the relative level of creation. And finally, the celestial level of the physiology is where we're looking at, thank you so much, we're looking at our own being as a field of creation, which has the ability to hum or resonate in specific energy frequencies to create an underlying influence or effect. And in this case, as I'm asking divinity, how do we structure on these subtle levels of creation to produce this foundation for dismantling the belief systems and imbalances? Grace comes first. Grace comes first. And I didn't know it was going to come first, so that's a surprise to me, but it's beautiful. Grace is beautiful. So grace is the underlying frequency, which is resonating. The beauty of grace is that it is a very integrated quality of consciousness, which interfaces with laws of nature in a profound and powerful way. Grace has a way of creating synchronicity. Grace allows the right information to come at the right time. It puts you at the right place at the right time. It helps to maintain a flow of information in the case of this webinar so that we unfold the work that we're doing tonight in a sequential way so that everything happens according to divine intelligence, allowing us to feel much more integrated and connected to that divine intelligence level of our own self and to use it in a concrete way to produce the effects that we need to produce, in this case, to dismantle centuries and centuries of belief systems which have blocked the ability for humanity to express and experience life in terms of its full potential. Another interesting thing about grace is it not only hums like a resonation of the celestial body, but grace also has a very distinct reality at the causal level of creation as well. Because we can think of it as almost like a kind of substance, as a form of very soft, sort of radiant, very kind of pristine quality of light energy, which when it meets consciousness or awareness at the causal level of the physiology has a radiant effect. It permeates the tissues of the being, and it permeates the subtle tissues of the being, the subtle levels of the physiology. And it creates like a kind of it's almost like a kind of armor, but it's more like the wings of an angel. It's more like the softness of the light of tenderest love, which protects one's being in the face of any kind of negativity because it is so pure. And another thing that I see happening here is at the causal level of physiologies, some karma is restructuring for everybody in the group. And that's happening because the way we approach or the way we respond to the heavier, denser energies in the environment is a byproduct of habit. So there are some habits that are clearing. Even at the causal level, we can find imbalances. So that's good because we want to find those and clear them. Habits. Also fear. And it looks like definitely some of this fear that we want to dismantle has worked its way into the system. And we're looking not just at ourselves individually, but in the collective, all the way down to the causal level of creation. So the antidote to fear is divine grace. That's why that evidently had to structure first. So divine grace structures, divine grace is like the predominating energy. And what happens is the divine grace meets with that fear, and together a kind of a completion of experience is produced. And this is very interesting because what we're really producing here is a level of experience which is very rich, rich to the point of being sort of poignant. What happens when we dare, to enter the field of energy healing is that a kind of cosmic dance is created between the denser energies of creation, which tend to block the flow of divine light, and then the qualities of consciousness, that is particularly infinite field of pure consciousness, the interface. And the interface, there's like a bliss point. They interface in a specific balance of relationships so that you have something a little bit uncomfortable, but then you also have the comfort and the sweetness and the softness and the expansion of consciousness. You have these two going on at the same time, and there's a balance of them that's just right to produce internally a wave of like devotion to the task of completing or resolving the imbalance. And that wave of devotion is a subtle, or I should say, a kind of a universal form of communication between divine being and its own structure, which in this case are your physiologies and your mental and emotional structures. You know, are all the manifest level of the self. And this, what's happening at this exact moment, is specifically oriented towards affecting the heart chakra, the auric field of the heart chakra, and the actual physical heart, also the thymus, because that's sitting at the point of the center point of the heart chakra, but the physical heart, circulatory system. Some of the fear sits in the circulatory system, and particularly at the collective level of the humanity. Fear, and then lack, and then afraid of not having enough. Generally the flow of blood in the body, and this is one of the areas I was thinking would be interesting to cover in our webinar, and I'm not sure if we're going to do this tonight or tomorrow, but it could be interesting to go through the body part by part and look at the correlation between the actual physical organs and their mental and emotional correlates. The correlation of the correlates. Anyway. They're counterparts. Let's call those counterparts. The heart and the circulatory system are the flow of bliss in the body, the flow of joy, the flow of sweetness. And those hemoglobin cells are associated with, they have a relationship with wealth. And they're warm. The blood is warm and it keeps us warm. So that warmth is itself the flow of divine being. You are never out of it, and there is no part of you that is ever out of that is anything but that. So this establishment, when I'm saying what I just said, was for the sake of giving expression to a download that was coming in, not just for you and for your intellect and mental body, but also for the ancestors. And we're looking at quite a few generations. Looks like about 16 generations of ancestors are online with us and are really moving their belief system around to understand the role of wealth, the role of affluence, abundance, wealth even meaning health and love and friendship, all that is good, and how all of it originates inside the system of each individual person. So what we're doing is, I'm seeing this is a healing basically for the heart that we're still in here, is an establishment of the foundation of fullness for everyone. The foundation of fullness. And with that, I'm feeling that nice poignant wave of emotion through everyone's physiology, that sweet, like it's so sweet, but it almost hurts a little bit because that's the lack that's moving out. As the lack starts to get a little loosened up from the system, it starts to move out, then we start to feel that relationship between that discord and the softness, the purity, the bliss, the sweetness of being as they interact with each other. And that relationship is offered back like a flower at the feet of divine being, because it's so sweet when it kind of bubbles up through each of our individual physiologies. It does so with such innocence and such a kind of fascinating purity of expression, I could say. We could say, like, each one of us we can think of as the antenna of the universe, right? We've talked about that a lot in previous webinars. So each of us is our own little antenna of wholeness, and we're all connected to wholeness at our foundation, at the celestial level of being. And each one of us experiences that in our own unique little way. And what's happening is that the collective of our experience of that is being offered back to the divine. And each person's balance between the discord and the resonance, the consonant resonance, is slightly different. And as that's offered back, what's happening is it's like a tickle. It's like a tickle for the mother of the universe, for the creator of the whole creation. And I say that it's like that because my experience is, as soon as we offered it, it flows into the field of infinite divine being, and it reflects infinitely. So it rolls out to its own infinite nature, and then it is returned or received back into the physiology. And it literally comes back in as a kind of a tingling, sweet, blissful energy, which then comes and speaks to the heart a quality of lightness in the heart. This is the antidote to a lot of the heavier, denser emotions for a lot of people are held in their circulatory systems and in their hearts, particularly for the collective consciousness, particularly for the ancestors, I mean, for all of us too. But I thought it was really interesting since the last webinar, this is like new information that has come up, is that it came to my awareness that heart disease is still the #1 killer in the Western world, and that hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years of development physiologies has given rise to a nice, big, thick, fatty organ up here in our heads. And this lovely, fatty organ, our brains, have tremendous capacity to think very deeply, all that intellectual structure and the synthesis and the analysis and the, all the sort of reasoning capacity and so forth. But the heart is every bit as important. All the organs have the potential to be so important. And the organs that we need to look at here, and this does, believe it or not, relate to mental and emotional wellness, the heart and the gut. The heart and the gut are two really important areas of the physiology because they have the potential to be as well developed, as brilliant, as useful as the brain. As much concentrated seats of divine expression as the brain. If we feel our attention, we do a scan. Let's do a scan right now. You want to feel the attention through the body. Just feel through your body. And what we're asking, the question we're asking is, where is there the greatest concentration of being? Where is there the greatest quantity of God energy? And if you say the tips of my hairs or my eyelashes, the lobes of my ears, no, it's in the central nervous system. If you feel through your body, there's a concentration right down the core. That's where it's all really thick. That's where consciousness is thick in your body. And from there, the central nervous system speaks to all the other organs. And how thick and how concentrated it is there has a lot to do with how well the rest of the body functions. Well, it turns out that the heart also has the capacity to be as concentrated or as thick, as full an expression of divine consciousness, divine being, pure consciousness, pure awareness as the central nervous system, that the circulatory system can also do that. So, offering that vision into the field of pure consciousness, what comes back is, first I heard music. And when I hear music, I know that we are dealing with a level of the intelligence in the physiology that is, you could say, the celestial level of the body's intelligence. So each of the different systems in the body, this nervous system, the circulatory system, the muscular system, et cetera, digestive system, lymphatic system, all the systems, immune system, they all have a kind of underlying intelligence in them. They'll have their own unique quality of intelligence. And within the context of those intelligences underlying, there's also, they're like really, really fine intelligences in the body. Very, very delicate, very, very tiny, tiny submicroscopic intelligences in the body that are responsible for a lot of the basic intelligent functioning in the body, such as the way we metabolize food at a subcellular level, for example, or keeping the veins and arteries of the body free of plaque, or how the immune system heals up an owie if you get one. Those kind of functions that on a mental, conscious thinking level, we don't really tend to process those experiences a lot, but they are processed, and they're expressions of a very high levels of intelligence in the body, but that are very, very fine. So when I hear that, there's a particular kind of music, and that's just the way this body processes that information. But that's why I'm giving it back to you, because you're the ones who are actually doing this healing, and I'm just the reporter. So sometimes I call those Devic intelligences, as in the word Deva, like a fine being of creation, which does not possess a physical form. The Devas are activating. These intelligences in the body are activating. They're waking up. And as they do that, and our attention is kind of alert to the awakening of the Devic intelligence of the physiology, this overarching theme that we're working with tonight, which is the balance between negativity and positivity, the way they interface with each other in order to wash off or clear away negativity from the system, to detoxify mentally, to detoxify emotionally, to detoxify through the long annals of the memory of the soul, lots of different areas where hurts were sitting, where areas where unresolved issues reside. There is a saying from the Vedas that Brahman devours everything. And there is, at that Devic level of intelligence, there's a very lively or active quality associated with that principle, that whatever the imbalance is, whatever it is not so big that it cannot be dismantled or broken down. And the fact that we've kind of come a big circle back to that word dismantle, means that we're at that point in our process now where we're ready to dismantle these bigger, more challenging, they look so solid like big mountains of stress, the big, dense, heavy, although these are full of devas, these are beautiful, soft beings, but there are those in the collective consciousness, and some of them are sitting in the collective of the ancestral archives. Deep memories that are, what happens in families sometimes is that challenges that face humanity, some of them are so big and they're so dense that one individual lifetime is certainly not enough to address some kind of big, dense, dark imbalance. A really common example for a lot of people in our generation is that many generations have carried a sense of not loving themselves or not liking themselves or feeling that they are somehow unworthy of happiness or that they deserve to suffer. That's something, and it gets carried and it gets passed to the next one, to the next one, to the next one. And so each generation works on it a little bit. Each generation works on it from their angle, ever attempting to kind of get a handle on a sort of a big belief, chunk of belief there that's being held at a collective level. And when it's being held at a collective level, the belief seems even bigger and stronger and scarier than if it's just an individually held belief. Particularly because sitting in the ancestral archive or sitting in the physiologies of many ancestors means that it has affected the DNA. Now, the activation of the Devic level, the physiology that we were just having, is at such a fine level that it's right down there at the molecular level, the physiology. And that lovely, tingling, beautiful, yummy download that we got when the Davic level of the physiology activated, was affecting the DNA. That means it was going in and it was starting to dismantle the methyl groups, which over many generations had gotten attached to the DNA, thus silencing areas of the DNA. So what is required of us at this moment is to activate the quality of gratitude and appreciation to our own Davic intelligence and to the Mother of Creation for making it possible for us to experience the brilliance and the sophistication of that level of our own intelligence. So what's happening is that level of our own intelligence, which is down here at a nice celestial and causal level, is being infused with appreciation, love, acknowledgement, validation, understanding, adoration, and as such is again being offered like flowers to the feet of the divine. It's being dropped, we let it go. Anytime we have something fabulous going on, then we just let it go. Give it back to the divine. And what it does, because of our group, and this is something we can only do in a live webinar, guys. If I try to do this by myself, it's not quite the same. It's not as powerful. It's not as beautiful. It's not as expansive. So this is why I love you so dearly, and I so honor and appreciate you being with me at this time, us all being together and doing this collectively. When we do this collectively and offer it in, it goes in like a tickle into the heart of the Mother of Creation, the heart of the Mother of the universe. And in that place in creation, it ripples out to infinity. And what I'm seeing happening is very interesting. Now we start getting into lots of new territory. Okay, so download coming in, and a lot of things that didn't make sense to me earlier in this webinar are starting to make sense. So thank you all for your contributions, for the contributions of your brilliant light that allows this to happen. As this tickle is going into the Mother of Creation, and it's starting to ripple out into infinity, what I see happening is it's rippling out not just through this universe, but it's rippling out through simultaneous parallel universes, through multiple universes. And that is significant because it is from the level of simultaneous parallel universes where the qualities of intelligence, which are very, very non-human, interface with our world on our earth right now. Like, how many of all of us have thought at least once a day or even more often, why can't the world just be nice? Like, why can't we just live in a nice world where there's no war and where everybody is interfacing with our environment in such a way that the environment is not hurt, and that we are putting our attention and the money and technology into evolving technologies and evolving ways of making life really fabulous for everybody? Why does it seem that a large majority or proportion of social intelligence or social resources, and please forgive us, those of you who are listening in Europe and in the middle of the night, no less, that here in America, 54% of our national resource goes to war. More than half the money that this country produces is used to kill people overseas. And there's a part of me that just says, how could that even happen? Like, everybody I know is really nice and doesn't want to kill anybody. I don't know anybody who wants to kill somebody. You know, how could it be that 54% of our resources are going to create horror? Just doesn't make sense. So This is the stress. This is the part that we're actually looking at, because we can basically trace within our own physiologies every little area that's not quite right. You know, weakness in the digestion, or problems with the immune system, or, you know, we can go a long list of different things, the heart, there's too much inflammation in the body, all the different little things that plague the physiology. We can trace it back through generations, back through past lives. We can trace it through the collective consciousness to the fact that there's some kind of a overlaying structure over the collective consciousness of the world. And we know, like in America, we've got this 54% going towards military spending, right? But we know that there are a lot of places on Earth where people are living at even lower levels of comfort and dignity and ease than we are in America. So, you know, America isn't alone in its, you know, maybe they're not failing at their spending, but, you know, we know that there are places in Africa and India where the poverty is so extreme and so much congestion of humanity, in China. And, you know, there are things that people have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, nice people who have to deal with, that it doesn't seem like, it seems as if, as a collective, that we already have the resources to not have to have, for that not to have to happen. So, simultaneous parallel universes. That's where I'm seeing an interface of resonations, of impulses of intelligence, of consciousness, basically, which are dissonant, which are creating, which interface with, like, fear, for example. I see you, I'm seeing it. I'm looking at that darkness, that density. It's interesting. I'm seeing all kinds of different universes, and they're universes where to this universe are almost, if this makes sense, inside out. They're universes like that are kind of inside out to this universe, like a negative. It's a big picture, and I'm offering the big picture that I'm seeing back to Ma, back to the source of creation, and asking, what can we do in the context of this webinar? How can we address this vision and this understanding which has been gifted us? How can we use the gift of this understanding to create from within our own divine intelligence the impulses which, or the resonations, which will have the most balancing effect? I think the intention is to align everything with cosmic evolution in such a way as to be utterly life supportive for literally every aspect of creation, including those universes and those levels of creation, even in our universe, where life is so, so different from the way it is the corporeal life on Earth. It's so different that we can't even begin to comprehend that life. So I'm offering that question in. How can we harmonize? How can we resonate? How can we restructure ourselves in such a way as to spontaneously live, spontaneously flow in our own being, so that we are so utterly supportive, we are so utterly devoted in every action, so much devotion in every impulse, that all the creation is blessed. All the creation looks to Earth and to humanity and says, oh, they're the best, we just love them, we'll be really nice to them. Because right now what's been going on is looking to Earth and thinking, oh, how can we take advantage of them? How can we twist things around on Earth so that enough fear is produced that it fuels this other function or structure that we've got going on in some other place or whatever? again, it's coming back to the heart and circulatory system. We're looking at the emotional level of the physiology. One of the things that I wanted to bring out in this webinar is that when we look at these two levels, which is where these belief systems sit. On the mental level, we've got 4 layers: conscious mind, subconscious mind, unconscious mind, and avenue of awareness. And to a large degree, those belief systems are sitting in conscious, subconscious, and unconscious, particularly subconscious and unconscious levels of the mind. In the emotional body, there's more of it's more field-like. The emotional body is more field-like. There's a range of density of feelings or emotions that we feel in the emotional body. They're very concrete, very clear emotions, easily identified by everyone, such as fear, anger, love, forgiveness, compassion, like that. But then there's a whole nother level of the heart or the emotional body that's more abstract feelings, like the kind of remote memories that you have in dreams. You know, those kind of like really abstract feelings, you know, they're combinations or flavors, like the feeling that was in your great-grandmother's house when she was growing up. And this brings me to a point which I think is very, very interesting about the structure. You know, I've kind of simplified what I feel is from the very subtle level of the physiology to the dense level of physiology. I've simplified that by sticking my fingers up here and giving names to each of the different layers, right? But the truth is that as we get to the deeper levels, down into this area, it's not really clean. The cuts aren't clean. Up at the surface level, it's really clean, like my eyebrow starts there and then it ends over there. That's like really clean. It's pretty obvious. But if we're looking at, say, unconscious level of the mind, well, we could say that the unconscious level of the mental body kind of includes or incorporates some of these subtler levels of the physiology, in a sense, you know, just because for a lot of people, a lot of people aren't used to directing their attention into those subtle levels of their being, and therefore those areas are considered unconscious because the muscle hasn't been developed. The development of the muscle, the development of the ability to get in and to fathom those areas, and we're having to do this first before we bring up the right energy resonance to get rid of that darkness, is in the emotional level of the physiology. It's in the heart. It's in the heart chakra area. It's in the fact that one of the underlying themes of tonight's webinar is evolution and development of the heart, not just on a theoretical level and not just on the level of offering different heart experiences, but actual, literally physical evolution of the heart. Just as sun gazing can give rise to growth of the pineal gland, people who sun gaze a lot, they found that by they measure the pineal gland. People who sun gaze a lot, their pineal glands are bigger than people who don't. They can sometimes be a lot bigger, like a lot bigger. The other thing about the pineal gland is it starts growing in about middle age and it becomes bigger. Well, even in the case of the heart, it's not necessarily a matter of the heart itself becoming a larger organ, because we want the heart to be an exquisitely healthy organ. But it is a matter of the evolution and development of the neural connections in the heart. Yes, the many, many neural connections in the heart. Now, in the brain, the aspects of the nerve cells in the brain called dendrites. This has to do with something called neuroplasticity, that the dendrites actually reform themselves. Up to 70% of the dendrites change every single day based on your experience. From one day to the next, each day is different. So those dendrites, they change based on experience. Sometimes they'll grow longer, sometimes they'll contract back. So in the heart, this quality of neuroplasticity, but also what I'm seeing is an increase in the neural web of the human heart. This is what's happening. These are the Davic intelligences in the body are working on a kind of not making the heart bigger, but making it more refined, making it more intelligent, making it more sophisticated in its capabilities as an organ in our body. And as we do this integration of who and what we are with our full potential, what we're doing is we're swinging back and forth between changes in the physical body to changes in the belief system to changes in the way we utilize our software, our consciousness and our, the way we build up the muscle of our attention so that we can direct it very intelligently and in a very powerful and sophisticated manner. So during this webinar, what we're doing is we're kind of sliding back and forth between all these different areas of the instrument in order to bring everything up in an integrated and balanced and graceful manner. So right now, this evolution of the heart, and what this is going to do is it's going to protect everybody's heart. Some people in this webinar are also receiving a kind of a big upgrade in the entire circulatory system to support the ability for that circulatory system to be much more balanced and healthy and run clean. For a lot of us, it's a matter of running clean. Oh, I'm so proud of you. Oh, I'm so happy. I'm so grateful to the people that are here that have those issues that allow that gift to come forward, because even if you have a very healthy circulatory system and a very healthy heart, those individuals in our group who are getting the extra upgrade of means by which the metabolic process at a cellular and subcellular level takes place in the physiology so that one does not produce as much toxicity, as much plaque inside the circulatory system, that's being offered to everybody, even those in the webinar tonight whose hearts and circulatory systems are very healthy. And a question just came in. Hello. One of my favorite question asking people. Hello. If it's relative, okay, so here's this very exquisite lady. She's in morning time over on the Pacific Rim here. Hi, Dorothy. If it is relevant in terms of our environments, could you please teach us some tools for creating and using matrices in challenging environments? I find myself in crowded group situations where it isn't dangerous, just very, very heavy with what appears to be repressed mental, emotional stuff. Yes, this is the stuff that we are getting at. Oh, your question is perfectly timed, because this heavy environmental energy is exactly what we're working to dismantle in this webinar. So thank you for bringing that up. And her body seems to react with fear because the energy affects her physiology so unpleasantly when in these heavy places. Thank you very much. Beautifully put. What a sweetheart. Okay. So I have to use this question as a cue that we're ready. We've done the changes, the shifts in the physiology, the shifts on the level of being, such that we're ready to start addressing these heavy energies in the environment. The heavy energies are not just the role or the part. Everything's okay?
My screen froze up. I'll check in.
Oh. Okay, mine didn't. Okay, I'm talking. Okay, good. Sorry. It looks like everybody lost connection for a minute or something. Anyway, I guess we're back.
Everybody is able to come back.
Okay, good. Thank you for bearing with us through that, everybody. I really appreciate it. I'm just checking my internet connections here to make sure that everything's tight. Okay, it looks good. Sometimes, and I would just like to make a point about that, because there are never any coincidences. Nothing is ever random. But the fact that the technology bleeped out just for a minute was actually an indication that we're stepping into a we're touching into a field where there's some very intense stuff that we need to do now, and that's on the table for examination. It's not unusual for technology to freak out when we start getting into the finer levels of creation. We start looking at and addressing areas that have before never really been addressed by people, by us, by humans. So what we're looking at, I would like to say in response to this lady's question, is those heavy energies, that heavy emotional stuff, and the stuff that she experiences when she's in really crowded places. That energy is a byproduct of this interface between our universe and these simultaneous parallel universes, where there's a sort of discordant relationship, and it gives rise to heavinesses that sit at levels of people's physiologies where they don't feel they have access to that energy. They don't feel they have the resources to deal with it. They don't know how to find it even. People find themselves when you're on that crowded bus or train or whatever, people feel like basically victims of their own inner complexities and challenges, and they don't even know they wouldn't even know to address them, because they are hardly cognizant of the fact that that's even there in a sense. It's like a given. People just accept, well, that's just the way life is, is that it's terrible and I have this miserable life or whatever, my husband drinks and he beats me up or whatever. So another question just came in. So let me address this first question with the matrices, then we'll look at the next question. Thank you, everyone, for offering questions. So matrices, it's interesting, my beautiful one, that you mentioned matrices, because it hadn't occurred to me that matrices might be a good way to create a coordination, a graceful field relationship between ourselves and those simultaneous parallel universes where the influences are causing density on Earth. And I'm just asking Divine Being if that's the most effective tool. And what I'm getting is there does seem to be, it looks to me like if we want to call it a matrix, kind of a custom matrix, a customized matrix, which is a communication. It's all about opening a flow of truth, transparency, communication, honesty, which wasn't previously at all. In fact, there was nothing. Taking the internet to places where it has never been, basically. And this opening of communication flow, of soft, sweet, clear, pure, fueled by that pristine light, which was the initial impetus behind the manifestation of the whole universe, or the whole multiverse, as we'd like to say, and bringing in a certain quality, which I label as Narayana, because that is the energy that sits at the turn. So there was the wholeness of creation curled in on itself, one singularity. And then there was a point where it went from that to the Big Bang. And the point where it turned, that point where it went from being in to being out, there's a certain point where it turned the corner, it bent around and it went into its new phase. That is the quality of being or consciousness that sits at that point, has that name, Narayana. Narayana. And that energy is just the right energy to interface with this structure which has been influencing the family of humanity for at least 10,000 years, more, I think more, a long time, 20, 25, around 25,000 years it looks like. And that has been keeping this dense, sort of dark, repressive energy on our earth. Could even be earlier than that. Like I'm looking back and I'm seeing back to the sinking of Atlantis and the kind of when all the oceans rose. That was about 14,000 years ago. Wow. Okay, I didn't realize that our group was going to go in and address this heavy, weighty energy like this, but congratulations, everyone. So, yes, for our dear lady on the Pacific Rim, the matrix that you need in your astral body, I call the Christ matrix. Because what it does is it creates a shielding around your body, which is so tender. It is so delicate in its compassion and sweetness that it reflects only softest compassion, only tenderest love in every direction. And when your strength is your compassion, then what you draw into your physiology is only a reflection of that, is only the softest, sweetest, tenderest energies. Now, I know that when you're where you're living, you're dealing with people who are struggling and suffering a lot. I understand that. But even within those physiologies, there is a beauty. Within every being, there is a beauty. Even within very dense beings, there is a beauty. And this matrix, this custom matrix, which is creating an open flow of communication, it's expanding our internet. We're getting the DHL or whatever out into the country now. We're getting it out into the remote areas of creation, into the simultaneous parallel universes, is allowing for it's allowing not only flow of truth, but what it means is that areas that have been shrouded or covered in mystery, in misunderstanding, are now revealing. And that's great, because what that means for us is more tools. That means more understanding, more reality, more. We can't be fooled. We can't be tricked. We can't be trolled. It means that we know the score. Humanity knows the score. And we have been in this webinar, and anybody who watches as we're going along, we have been given this gift of understanding, of truth, so that we can't be trolled, we can't be fooled, because our hearts have evolved during tonight's webinar sufficiently to allow us to respond to the truth in a way which is deeply compassionate, which is deeply appreciative of life, even if that life really doesn't look like human life at all. It's still a divine being. And if it's perceived by us, as it's perceived by us, it is very much an aspect of our own nature. Because we are, remember, each of us is the antenna of the universe, but the reality of one's essential true nature is you are the whole universe. Okay, I hope that answers the question. Let's look at the next question. Hi, Dorothy. Is it possible that there is an energy medicine we can create to help heal the discord among the many groups of people around the world who are killing each other and desecrating our beautiful planet? An affirmation or visualization to meditate upon? Oh, that's such a beautiful question. Thank you. I love it. So what I'd like to say about energy medicines, and we're just at our hour, but I do want to take a minute to answer this because it's a great question. We can start the healing of the planet and the many groups. Yeah, I don't know if you may have found out, you may have read about, you guys don't go and look at pictures of the chemical warfare thing that happened yesterday. My son said he saw it and he feels kind of scarred. It hurt him to see that. But those things that are happening are really, it's a big deal. You know, this is hard stuff that people are dealing with. Affirmations and even visualizations are kind of more at a dense level, or more at a concrete level, like an affirmation, like the divine in me forgives you. I ask the divine in you to forgive me. The divine in me forgives myself. That's an old one from a man named Paul Cutright back in the 1970s. Anyway, it's a good one if you are not getting along with a friend. The divine in me forgives so-and-so. I ask the divine in him to forgive me. The divine in me forgives myself. It's nice. But what happens is, as long as the mind is engaged in the words of the affirmation, or even as long as the mind is engaged in the sort of the visualization of something, you know, of seeing the world like radiant with light or something, that affirmation is more powerful when it's offered into the field of divine being, when we let it go. It's the letting go of the affirmation that makes it really powerful. As long as the mind's kind of holding on to the affirmation and we're thinking it as words in our mind, it's never going to have the same level of effectiveness with regards to actually changing or manifesting a different reality than when we let it go. Why letting it go? Because there's a point where when we let it go, it goes out of the range of being words, and it becomes a very delicate feeling. It goes into the heart area. The heart, understand that when we have an affirmation, we think it up here in our big, nice, big, fat, healthy brains, right? Our well-developed human brains. When we start to let it go, what happens is the brain lets it go. It goes into the heart. The heart interprets the affirmation in a way which is so sophisticated, which is so powerful, which is so subtle, that it takes that affirmation to a whole new level. And I really want to say how much I appreciate this question, because it's in terms of what we're doing as a group for the whole world. And the thing about the family of humanity and our whole world, including the environment and all the nice animals that live on our world, all the beautiful trees and plants that live here, is that the world is in a state of continuous change and evolution and flux. It's just constant. You know, every second people are dying and people are being born and things are happening everywhere. And so the affirmation of this second will be a little different from the affirmation of the next second. And that is why the affirmation has to be addressed from the level of the sophisticated heart. Because the heart, and we didn't really talk about the gut tonight, and that's another area that's got a huge potential to really do some amazing things for us and for our environment with regards to energy healing. But I'm glad we worked on the heart tonight. That was important. But what I'm saying is that it is the intention behind this question, which is itself the seed of the affirmation. So what you would do is you would take the intention behind the question, and I'll read it again. Is it possible that there is an energy medicine we can create to help heal the discord among the many groups of people around the world who are killing each other and desecrating our beautiful planet? Is there an affirmation or a visualization? So what I would like to offer back is that there is an impulse of pure energy that comes from this very sophisticated intelligence, very subtle intelligence of the heart, which is absolutely appropriate because it has been, when it's offered into the divine self, it becomes refined by or rarefied in the home of all the laws of nature, in the home of infinity. And as such, it comes back out through the antenna. So then we become, what's really being asked here is, how can we become not just receivers of divine wisdom, but also transmitters of divine wisdom? So her question is, I'm rewording your question. How do I become a transmitter of the precise impulses of intelligence, which will have a maximally beneficial effect for the whole creation? And that request, how do I do that, is offered into one's divine being. And from the level of divine being comes back forth through our physiologies, each person from their slightly different angle, to answer each person's question in its own unique way. So each one of us has our own gift, right? Each one of us has our own strength to offer into this process. I would like to offer one more thing, because I want to respect people's time. We're just 6 minutes over. But that is that the desire to create or to transmit through ourselves as a kind of transmitter-receiver, that the transmission can be most effective if it is offered not so much directly out to everybody on earth like that, but what if we use the transmission, what if we use the impulse of intelligence to direct it to everybody who has the capacity to also be a sacred transmitter? In other words, to all the energy healers and all the saints and all the well-wishers and all the pure of hearts and all the mothers and all the fathers and all the beautiful innocent children and all the, you know what I'm saying? Could we connect in, or could we connect into the simultaneous parallel universes to those energies which were, or because of not knowing any better, not knowing cosmic law, we were functioning in a way that we were drawing in those energies in a negative way. How can we fold them back in to that? Because we now have the internet, we're now connected to the simultaneous parallel universes in such a way as to incite a response from this larger body of creation to elicit light, elicit support from very, very abstract, very different levels of creation, life as it exists at very previously unrecognized levels of creation, that rather than acting like enemies towards Earth, they become our friends. So that's what's being created. And it's just this absolutely beautiful impulse that came from this sweet, sweet woman, this brilliant, intelligent, amazing woman who asked this question. It's that impulse. Is it possible? Is it possible that we can give you anything that will allow our relationship to evolve with grace and in alignment with the heart of the Mother of the Universe, so that the love that flows from this reality, this human reality, this earth reality, that flows from our reality into those simultaneous parallel universes, even that are so different from our own, will elicit a response of all good, of all support of nature, support for everyone's evolution, support for everyone's well-being. Of course. We're doing it. We're doing it. This is a really beautiful note to end on. And our webinar went a few minutes over, but I think it was well worth it. I'm looking forward to tomorrow's webinar. It should be very interesting to see where we end up going from here. So thank you everyone very much for joining me tonight. I want you to know that each one of you has earned a free Distance Energy Work session by purchasing tonight's webinar. And you will also receive a recording of tonight's webinar, and you will receive a recording of tomorrow's webinar. And I'm looking forward to sharing that with everyone. And anything more that we can possibly do, thank you. Thank you for being with me tonight. It's been amazing. See you soon.